Welcome to In Fearless Conversation, a podcast from 261 Fearless, where every discussion is an opportunity to shape the future. I'm your host, Kim Chafee, and together we'll explore any topic that impacts a woman's quality of life, from leadership and personal growth to health and financial security. Join me and discover how a fearless conversation can shape the future you deserve. Welcome back to In Fearless Conversation. Today's episode is one that I've been dying to do for a while now because I think it is so important to a woman's independence and empowerment. Today, we're talking about money. I'm not sure what kind of feelings it brings up for you when I say the word money, but for many people, it brings up feelings of unease or anxiety because there's this fear of the unknown for many women. Some might liken it to how one felt about running before getting into it. And that's why I'm so excited that Dr. Erika Rasure from Beyond Finance is joining us for this fearless conversation today. Dr. Erika is the Chief Financial Wellness Advisor at Beyond Finance, 261 Fearless's new official financial wellness partner. Beyond Finance is focused on helping Americans take back their financial independence. An accomplished financial advisor and university professor turned financial therapist, educator, and researcher, Dr. Erika's rare perspective and expertise are highly sought after and celebrated by finance advocates worldwide. I really think this conversation will, at the very least, start to shift how you feel about money. And I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's get started. Excellent. Well, Dr. Erika, welcome to In Fearless Conversation. I'm so thrilled to be talking with you today. I've been wanting to have this kind of conversation for a long time. And I'm just so thrilled that 261 Fearless has recently signed a partnership with Beyond Finance. So they are now our official financial wellness partner. And so having you on the podcast to talk about something that I think a lot of people have mixed feelings, I guess at best, you'd say, about money. I'm really excited for where this conversation will take us. In the intro, listeners learned a little bit about you and what you do as a financial wellness expert. But I want to just kind of give you the floor a little bit. If you want to just tell us a little bit about what you do exactly as a financial wellness expert. What does that mean?
Absolutely. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's such a passion of mine to be able to talk about this. I know people say it's my passion all the time, but it really is for me because I am a financial therapist. You know, as a financial therapist, I'm somebody who really works with the emotional, relational, and cognitive and behavioral aspects of our money. As a financial wellness expert, I really see it through the lens of a financial therapist because we are more than our money, yet so many of us define our value as a person based on the dollars in our bank account or the number of our credit score. And because money is so dynamic and touches every dimension of our lives, sometimes it's hard to separate one from the other, but that is such important and critical work to do to be holistically empowered with your money and comfortable with your life.
I love everything that you just said there. I feel like this conversation can go in so many different directions, and I'm really excited to see where our conversation takes us. So the concept of financial wellness, what exactly does that mean? And how is it something we look to achieve, or is it something more of a journey rather than a destination? Or how do we get there to financial wellness?
I love this because the word I use consistently in my practice is it is a journey. It is a feeling. You know, financial wellness isn't about perfection. It's about feeling safe and empowered in your emotional relationship with your money. And beyond that, it's not just a number. It's, again, not the number on your bank account or anything like that. It's how you feel when you think about and you experience your money. It's the envelopment of all of those things together. It's how you feel about your money, whether you feel good or bad or content with it, and being able to check yourself kind of at the door and say, is this where I want to be numbers and sense wise? But am I also where I need to be emotionally? Because in my experience, you can have all the money in the world and do everything right with your money. But if you're not emotionally invested in it, you might have a hard time feeling content with your situation. I've worked with people over the years who can be super high income and financially unwell. And I've worked with a ton of people who are low income and are financially well. It's the ability to make financial decisions from a place of clarity and instead of fear.
Wow. Okay. So that's a really different mind shift with money. It's not necessarily the number in your bank account. It's how you feel about that number and how your relationship is with money. Wow. Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. That is a really important shift. You talk about the emotional relationship people have with money. I feel like everyone's relationship with money is different, and not necessarily because of the number in their bank account, but what influences the relationship that people have with money? Is it something that maybe happened like as they were growing up and experienced with their parents and their family? What is it that holds the most weight?
So there's a different, there's lots of different influences we have. And I think that's probably one of the best places to start. And we often refer to this as a person's money story. And a person's money story is really the set of beliefs, these emotions, these patterns that we've been given or that we've inherited around money long before we even understood what money was. As a child, you may have somewhat of a comprehension, or as an adolescent, maybe, and even as a young adult, or even as a whole grown up, right? Well, sometimes we still don't understand, what money is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to speak to because we have all of these influences and these life transitions and all these experiences that really influence how we handle and interpret and process all of that. And so a lot of times when we're growing up, we hear things like, money is stressful or rich people are greedy. As a older adult, you might find, I'll just never have enough money. Or we don't talk about money is another thing, people heard about growing up, which I think has really been a detriment to the way we interact with our money as we grow older, because I think there's so much shame around talking about money because we're not supposed to. And I think that really creates some problems for all of us.
Yeah. And I'm curious how, just thinking about this money story and how it's different for everyone, it kind of brings up for me the whole topic of financial literacy, right? And how much people understand about finances and money and, all the different things that you can do with like investing or all of that. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the different experiences that maybe women have with financial literacy in connection, I guess, with their money story.
Yeah, and it's important to note that there are differences that exist. And when it comes to women in particular, I don't think women, less necessarily lack financial literacy, but rather I think women have been in many ways disconnected from financial agency and autonomy. And for women, I think it's less about capability, but rather more about that social conditioning and lived experience. In my work and from the clients I've worked with, I've been doing this for 21 years, women are often socialized to prioritize others, maybe a little bit of people pleasing, dare I say it. Maybe you're a little bit more at risk of waiting. Oh, don't do that. I think of Gwen Stefani's "I'm Just a Girl," won't let me drive my car, kind of minimizing that risk.
Yeah.
And which creates this like real disconnect from financial power, whereas men are often socialized towards performance and control and those measures of external validation. And women, I find when women feel safe and supported, they make just incredibly thoughtful and values aligned financial choices that boost their confidence, which is often the thing that keeps them stuck. What I find is most women do the majority of the financial housekeeping for the home. They pay
Mm-hmm.
the bills, they take care of it. But when it comes to things like investing, because they've been conditioned to be a little bit more risk avoidant, and they don't necessarily have that confidence because people don't talk about money with women the same way they talk about it with men, especially when it comes to things like investing. So they don't have the confidence. They might have the general knowledge, but they don't have the confidence to take that next step towards their growth. And I think that's where the differences lie with women. They can be financially literate, but they don't have that confidence to pull the trigger and go forward.
Mm. So then it's an empowerment kind of issue. It's not the knowledge, but it's being able to step outside your comfort zone a bit and really take that risk. That's where the growth happens, right? We talk about that all the time with running and 261. Staying inside your comfort zone isn't where you grow.
Right. It's about finding that growth edge. I couldn't agree with you more. And so when you're a woman and you're trying to figure out, okay, this is where I would like to go, and I have some knowledge on this, and I think my knowledge is good, but I need to take an additional step forward. And maybe I don't know where that additional step is, and maybe I'm a little in the gray about it. I want to remind women that you don't have to know everything about everything to take a step forward. You have to start somewhere. You have to decide, okay, I am going to take this step forward, even if I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I'm going to take this step because I believe in myself. I believe that I have the capability and the power to do this, even if maybe I get a door shut in my face. Maybe I go and talk to a financial advisor and they're dismissive of me, whether it's because of the amount I bring to the table, or maybe it's because I am a woman. I'm not going to let that be a setback that holds me down, because I believe in myself and I am worthy enough to find the answers for myself and find the community and the team that is there with me every step of the way. And that's trial and error, but we have to be okay with the trial and error.
And that's really hard to be okay with, because it's really being okay with failure in a sense, right? I mean, you're not going to be successful with every attempt that you make, but failure is where learning happens as well, right? So being willing to fail, it's again a mindset shift that we kind of need to overcome a bit. So, can you talk a little bit about the impact of the financial stress that people experience? Because I think it influences so much of someone's life, if I'm not mistaken. But the financial stress isn't something that you only experience when you're looking at your bank account, right? It's something that kind of translates into other areas of your life, even if you don't realize it.
100%. And we do have to remember that, like I said, money is very dynamic and it touches all other dimensions of our lives. And so if you're experiencing any kind of financial stress, it almost goes, to show 100% that it's going to influence these other parts of your life. And financial stress often isn't just about money. It's usually deeper in the sense that it's the result of uncertainty in your situation, whether that is, oh, I just got laid off, or I'm going through a divorce, a million different scenarios. But it also comes down to this perceived lack of control. When things are going on autopilot for a while and you have a disruptor come in, a life transition or something you weren't expecting, because life be lifing, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So what that does is it creates dysregulation in your nervous system. And if you're making money choices from a dysregulated nervous system, it's always going to result in chaotic money choices if you're coming from that. And so I think one of the things we can do to manage financial stress in ways that are healthy and supportive is be able to name it. You're experiencing this financial stress, sitting with it for a while, bringing awareness to it. You can't heal what you don't notice, right?
Sure.
And you can't regulate if you can't calm your nervous system around money. And so when the first thing is saying, okay, what am I afraid of? All right, I've lost my job, or I'm going through a divorce. What is the worst thing that can happen? What am I afraid of? And name it. And then start to try and contain it. It's not about, pushing your stress or anxiety out the window, but it's allowing yourself to sit in the anxiety, to sit in with the stress and the pain for a designated moment in time instead of letting it go unchecked. Because the more we let it go unchecked without doing some grounding or nervous system regulation, it's going to continue to spiral. And when it spirals like that, all then you can think of is everything that's going wrong instead of reframing things and coming back to, okay, well, what if this could go right? What if it goes this situation? And then you're able to create some sort of what I would describe as micro control around that. So you can start creating, small actions, whether that's, checking your bank balance or making a payment, scheduling a payment or making a phone call, whatever that looks like. It helps you put your body first and money second. So you can then begin to regulate before you make these bigger, longer decisions that could potentially have really, really chaotic and negative impacts in the long term, because that's what financial stress can do. It definitely impacts us in the short term, but if we aren't aware of it and we aren't able to change our behavior and maybe even offer some compassion to ourselves. You were talking about that spirit of learning earlier. When we can replace some of this shame or anxiety or stress that we feel around money with curiosity, it really fosters that spirit of learning and takes us out of the danger zone.
So you're talking about these life changes that people will experience, right? And I think, not to make the conversation political, because I don't want to get there in any kind of way, but our economy in the United States certainly is experiencing uncertainty right now. And I think a lot of people, even if they're not going through a big kind of life-changing episode with like divorce or something like that, are kind of nervous maybe about what might be coming for our economy and prices and things like that. Do you have any suggestions about how to navigate the financial stress that might be having on someone? I'm just asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. I can answer questions for friends, of course. I think a great way to start here is anchoring into what I would almost say is a truth. And that's that uncertainty is certain. That is one thing we know. That uncertainty in life is always going to be there, just like death and taxes, right?
Sure.
So acknowledging that and saying, okay, things are uncertain. There's always going to be uncertainty. And sometimes it's going to feel heavier than others, right? Sometimes there's going to be seasons in life where it just feels, I'm really scared right now. I'm really upset. I'm really unsure. I am really uncertain. And being able to frame it first from that perspective, and then to whittle it down a little bit, is to say, okay, I acknowledge that things are uncertain and I'm not really okay with that. But there's only one thing I can control in all of this. I can't control the economy. I can't control the political climate. I can't control anything other than me and my choices and how I choose to act and in the ways I choose to act. Am I going to act in alignment with my values? Or am I going to go into panic mode and act in relationship to the values that are external to me, that don't make me feel good? And I think when we can put ourselves in a place of control, because this is where a lot of this comes from, when we feel out of control, when we feel like we're being puppeteered, I guess for lack of better words, by external circumstances, you go through a divorce or, the political climate or the economic climate doesn't feel good to you. Sometimes you feel like you don't have that agency or autonomy, and it really can mess with your sense of identity. And so coming back into yourself and revisiting your identity and what you can control and the actions you can take, regardless of whatever is going on around you, can make you feel a little bit more confident in the way you move through life and the way you experience it. Because at the end of the day, you are the one in the driver's seat. And if you let somebody else or let something else take control of your driver's seat, you don't know where they're going to take you. And one thing I say all the time, is nobody cares as much about your money as you do. And so act like you care.
Yeah. Along those lines, you had talked about acting in line with your values and not the values of the external. Can you give us an example about what would that look like? What do you mean by our values and how we would use that to measure our money choices?
Absolutely. So I am a big fan of creating financial goals based on our financial values. And a lot of people haven't really done any work when it comes to establishing what your financial values are. I think a lot of us do it, at work or even personally, but we can take that same perspective and say, okay, what are the top 3 to 5 things that are important to me in terms of financial values, and identify those definitions and really put some work into saying, okay, my number one financial value is stability. And just from a personal anecdote, the way I define stability for myself is being able to go into Target or to any store and be able to spend as much money as I want on whatever I want without having to worry that I don't have enough money, or my bills aren't paid, or I don't have enough money in my checking account, or my savings, whatever that looks like. That is the freedom that comes with living in alignment with that. But if I am making decisions that are anti my value, maybe it is I'm building this value of stability and I'm not quite there, to target territory where I can spend everything. In the meantime, I've got to make financial decisions that get me there. And so that is being able to say, I'm going to walk into a store now and I'm going to evaluate each decision I make as whether or not this choice is in alignment with meeting the criteria, the definition of my financial value. And when you're able to put it in that definition, it almost takes you out of it, almost takes the emotion out of it. And like I said, I'm an emotions person. Emotions are very important when it comes to our money. But a lot of us make emotional decisions when it comes to our money that are not in alignment with our values because we haven't done a lot of the work around understanding that connection between emotion and money.
Okay, so what you're bringing up here is making me think about the concept that I think is kind of thrown around in a fun kind of way, but the concept of retail therapy.
Yeah.
And so, I think we've all been guilty of it before, right? It's like, oh, I had a bad day. I'm going to go and just, I don't know, it doesn't have to be something big, right? Just something small to kind of give me a pick-me-up.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that a little bit? What's the? I'm not saying that's terrible or bad. I'm just saying that's something. What I hear you saying about the whole values piece is something that maybe will keep that in check a little easier. I'm not sure. What do you think?
For sure. So retail therapy is very well alive, and it's something that people do. I've done it, and the way I used to engage in retail therapy was not only when I felt bad, but also when I felt good. Yes. Whether it was, it wasn't like a neutral emotion, but man, anytime I felt really bad, like having a bad day, I'm going to go shopping.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I've had the best day ever. I am going to go shopping. And so my edges were big swings in emotions. If I was somewhere in here, I didn't care. But when you have these shifts in emotion and that you're susceptible, and you've got your patterns, that's when you can say, okay, I need to double check myself before I proverbially wreck myself. Because you don't want to act in ways that, of course, negatively impact you in the future. Because a lot of the spending we do, the retail therapy, is often there to fill an emotional hole, right? So you might spend emotionally, do that retail therapy when you feel bad because you feel bad and you want to plug that hole, right? Or if you're like me, you might spend to celebrate and you don't have anybody externally to validate or celebrate with you. And that might sound sad, in some ways, but either way, you're trying to fill an emotional need. And when you're engaging in behavior that is a coping mechanism, it's like eating, to cope, or drinking to cope, or any of those things. It's the same kind of idea. We really got to identify why we are the way we are with our money, and figure out what those holes are that we're trying to plug, what they mean, how they show up in our lives, and where they came from. And once you identify where those things are, where those holes originated from, it's a lot easier for you to stop in the moment and say, I don't think I need to fill this hole with this spending. I think I need to fill this hole with maybe some mindful movement. Maybe I'm going to go for a run. Maybe I'm going to go for a walk. Maybe I'm going to practice some yoga, or I'm going to do some deep breathing, or I'm going to meditate, or you know what? I'm going to take a nap, because I need to think about how I'm going to feel about this spending when I'm out of the store. And that's one thing I say all the time is play the tape forward. Are you going to feel good about this by the time you get to the car? Are you going to feel good about the purchase when you get home? Are you going to feel good about it a month from now when the credit card comes? And if you can unequivocally say, yes, I can afford it. I was so happy and I bought this because I was happy and I have no regrets, then okay. We're not going to make a moral judgment out of that. We're not going to do that.
Right.
We have so many moral judgments placed on money as it is. But if you're doing it to fill a hole and you're not okay with how that feels later, that's where we need to stop and think about it.
Yeah, I think the shame around even retail therapy, right? Like the shame around that you need that. We need to get rid of the shame and kind of dig a little deeper. And I loved your suggestion of play it forward and think about how you're going to feel when you leave the store. I think that's so smart. That's a great suggestion. And I also loved your suggestion about going for a run instead, because we all know that running with the endorphins and all of that. So if you're feeling low, then perhaps put on your sneakers and go for a run instead. And then again, like you said, if you come back and you have the money for that and you still want that item, whatever it is, go for it. It's not about shaming. It's not about depriving yourself of things, right? I think there's a lot, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this quickly, but when we're talking about money, and I think debt is something that a lot of people are dealing with, there's this mindset of you have to deprive yourself of things in order to dig yourself out of the hole. I mean, is that necessarily true? Can you speak to that a little bit?
You're not wrong in that mindset for the most part. When people find themselves in what I call the financial condition of debt, a lot of times it's related to some major life event or transition. You got sick, or you lost your job, you went through a divorce, or you lost your spouse. Maybe you were scammed. I mean, there's just a million and one different reasons. And that's often, kind of the intro point of a lot of people getting into debt. It's not just, I think people have this huge misconception that the people that are in debt, right. I think it's a horrible thing to say, because I think it diminishes, the value. I mean, we're all one major life event away from debt, but there's this whole misconception that people who are in debt are people who don't care about their money and they're, bad people who, make bad spending decisions. And that's just the farthest thing from the truth. And the truth of the matter is when you find yourself in the financial condition of debt and you really want to find your way out of it, the immediate pull for most people is I have to pull and rein everything in, and I have to essentially put myself in a debtor's prison to try and make my minimum payments, try and get myself out of this hole. And in doing so, it really creates this hyper-focused, very tunnel vision point of view on your financial life as a whole. And so instead of being able to look at everything holistically, and debt is just one part of your entire financial picture, all of a sudden the debt becomes front and center, and you lose perspective of everything else. And so a lot of people who are dealing with debt, if they haven't gotten to the point where they're, making minimum payments and not making progress, but maybe they've got, some wiggle room still in their budget, they're not going to be putting money into their retirement account. They're not putting money into their emergency fund. They're not allowing themselves to have $10 a month to, go get a pumpkin spice latte in the fall because it they don't feel like they deserve it. And I don't think that is the right way to approach this. You don't have to be in a debtor's prison. You don't have to pay this ongoing penance because you are in the financial condition of debt. And if you're finding yourself in any of those categories, it probably means that you really do need to get some additional help when it comes to managing your debt. If your debt is what you eat, sleep, and breathe, and you don't feel there's anything in your financial life or even your personal life, because like I said, it bleeds, and you don't feel like there's any hope beyond that, that's when you need to talk to somebody and get professional help, which is, again, something that is very hard for people to do. As I was saying earlier, it's hard for us to talk about money. It's hard for us to talk about money when money is good. It is exponentially harder to talk about it when money is not so good. Even harder when you are in debt, because there is such a stigma. There's so much shame. And, to make that distinction when it comes to shame and guilt, when you're guilty over something, you're like, oh, I made a mistake. But when you feel shame, you feel that you are the mistake, that it is you personified. And that can really get in the way of people trying to find help when they need help.
Yeah, that's quite a huge barrier to overcome for sure. I'm looking at the time and I feel like this needs to be multiple podcast episodes. We're not going to solve all the financial wellness issues in one podcast, but what I would like to leave listeners with is maybe a good first step. If they are looking to achieve financial wellness, what's the first step that they can take on their way there?
I think the very first thing, I mentioned this earlier, is bringing awareness to your financial situation. Like I said, you can't heal what you don't notice. You can't bring wellness to your life if you're not aware of what you need to bring that energy towards. And so you might be very good with your numbers. You might have everything figured out, but you're still wondering why you still don't feel like you can spend money. Like, why is it uncomfortable for me to spend money? And that's when you start doing the work around trying to figure out what your money story is. Why might you feel that way? Did you grow up in a household where spending money was not an option? Did you carry that into adulthood? What values do you have? Were those given to you? Did you inherit them from somewhere or from life experiences along the way? And do those values still bring value to your life today? Or do we need to jettison some of them? Do we need to redefine them? Do we need to add new ones or subtract some? All of those things I think are really good first steps in trying to really bring awareness to our values, our money story, and determine whether or not we like the path we're on. Our, life is filled with a lot of different choices and a lot of different paths. And there's no one right path and there's no one, wrong choice. It's a series of all those things. But we can't make those choices. We can't act from a place of clarity without doing that initial awareness work. And when you can make choices from clarity, that's where the secret sauce of this financial wellness lies. It eliminates that fear. It eliminates that feeling of uncertainty, at least a little bit, minimizes it, should I,
Sure. The knowledge of knowing your situation, right? Knowing where you're at, where you're starting from. Knowledge is power, right? That's where the empowerment starts, where the independence starts.
Well, and the other thing, you mentioned knowledge is power, and I would agree. One thing I do notice, however, is a lot of women in particular don't get started on this because they feel like they need to know everything to even get started. And that will keep you stuck faster than anything.
Yeah.
You don't need to know everything about money. Most people don't. They just don't. And it's okay to admit that. It's okay to accept that. And I think there's so much pressure around money to feel like you have to know everything. And if you don't know everything, you're doing it wrong. And, there's all these statistics that come out. I see a headline every other day that's like, at this age, you should have this net worth. And you look at it and you're like, I don't have that net worth. I'm doing everything wrong. And
right.
Just go to your computer screen and Scarlett O'Hara it and be like, I'm just going to think about this tomorrow. Don't do that to yourself. You don't have to know everything to get started. It's gaining knowledge. It's setting one foot in front of the other on that path and running toward it.
Perfect way to end. I love it. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed this so much because, I think what's interesting is I feel like there's so many parallels you can draw with money and running. You're not going to sprint the whole way and you're certainly not going to expect to run a marathon a week after you started. Progress is built through that consistency, not necessarily that intensity. And some days are going to feel real heavy and they might feel heavy, but it doesn't mean that you're failing and you're going to have those setbacks. And just remember, you don't need to be the fastest. You just need to keep showing up. It's one step, one decision at a time. And finding a community also is what makes it sustainable. Healing with your money happens faster in safe, non-judgmental spaces, just like running does. We regulate each other, whether it's movement or money, we do better together. And we aren't meant to do hard things alone. And when we show up for ourselves, we can show up for others. And when we show up for others, at the end of the day, we're also showing up for ourselves.
Wow, that was an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful to Dr. Erika for joining us today to talk about financial wellness and our relationship with money and how we can empower ourselves by reflecting on our relationship with money and our money story. If you enjoyed this conversation and you want to hear more from Dr. Erika, there is more information on Beyond Finance's website, which I will link to in the show notes. I encourage you to check it out when you get a moment. Next week, we have another episode of The Inner Monologue, so we hope you'll tune into that. Until then, stay fearless. We'll see you soon.